What if I told you the army of the dead actually didn't harm anyone in The Lord of the Rings? We know how the movie goes, where, the army of the dead shows up at Minas Tirith, they defeat the forces of Sauron, and win the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. But in the books, it's a far different situation, and we actually have to look at the history there to better understand it. So behind me is this supernatural object known as the Stone of Eddic, and it's a giant black orb of stone brought out of Numenor by Isildur, the son of Elendil, and the ancestors of Aragorn. Not really much is given about this, not a lot of context about what it is or why it is, but one notable event occurs here, and it's during the War of the Last Alliance in the Second Age, where it's here that Isildur swears the oath with the army of the dead, the Mountain Men, to come and assist against Sauron. But they don't show up because they actually worshipped Sauron in the Dark Years before Isildur and the rest of the Numenorians showed up. And this pisses Isildur off, and he curses them. He says, "You'll never find rest until you fulfill your oath." And this has far reaching effects, where they never do find rest, even in death. And they become wraiths or shadow men that kind of, sit there and haunt the Dwimmelberg or the Black Mountain behind Dunharrow. So fast forward 3,000 years to the War of the Ring, and Theoden is mustering the Rohirrim, but something differs in the books from the movies. Aragorn's not just with Gimli and Legolas, he's with the Great Company, which include his kin Halbarad and the rest of the Rangers of the North, the Dunedain, as well as the twin sons of Elrond, which you never hear about in the movies, Elrohir and Elladan. Aragorn grew up with them, so they're homies. And so they all show up here, and they bring a message from Elrond, which says the days grow short. Follow the paths of the dead. That's pretty much what Aragorn's fate is. And so he leaves the night of when they're about to bounce from Dunharrow. And Eowyn tries to stop him, and he's like, no, this is my fate. So they follow through to the Dimholt, this forest back there of Dunharrow, into Dwimmelberg, the mountain where the paths of the dead are. And like Gimli's frightened. He barely remembers any of the journey. That's how frightened he was. And Aragorn goes in, he's like, meet me at the Stone of Eric and fulfill your oath. And nobody answers. But later, Legolas tells Gimli, the dead follow. And they pop out of the southern portion of the mountain to this area called the Morthon Vale or the Blackroot Vale. And there at the Stone of Eric, where the oath was sworn, Aragorn asks, why have you come? And the King of the Dead rises and he says, to fulfill our oath and to find peace. And then they go on this great run all the way to the south of Gondor to a port haven known as Pelargir, because they never go to Minas Tirith. The Corsair of Umbar are attacking, and they have to go up the Anduin to get to Osgiliath and eventually attack Minas Tirith. They get cut off, though, by the army of the dead and the Great Company, being Aragorn and everyone else. But the dead never attack anymore. With fear, they drive out the forces of Sauron utterly, and thus fulfill their oath, with Aragorn finally providing them peace once they have done this. That's why, when Minas Tirith and the events go up there, the Great Company shows up, not an army of the dead in the books.